Hey there, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Charles J. Baserap here with a quick update on #TheThing, and we're talking about the aftermath of my phone call on Thursday, October 22nd, with a member of Maryland Senator Ben Cardin's staff to discuss police reform. Well, how did that happen? Well, a few weeks back, I started this page with a sprawling epic spaced out over 5 videos collectively called Racism in America, in which I dealt with issues of racism and policing in America as we continue to experience the fallout of the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent demonstrations, both peaceful and riotous, that resulted. As a part of continuance of action on my part, I reached out to my government officials as well as local law enforcement agencies to discuss ideas on police reform that's more than a simple slogan, and that would serve to be more equitable for all parties by approaching it with a more balanced and bipartisan plan. For those who haven't checked it out already, these ideas are outlined more fully in episode 1.5 at around the 30-minute mark. Now, on the law enforcement side of things, my name was taken down as a potential participant for some roundtable type community engagement discussions comprised of regular citizens and former and current law enforcement personnel to be held at a time when our county has eased its current COVID restrictions. And the police I spoke with were actually very receptive to a lot of what I had to say, which was good to hear. Senator Cardin is one of my state senators, and when I spoke with people in his office, I was asked to send an email to be reviewed by his team, the text of which I'll put in as a link in the video description below, so please be sure to check that out. Now, a few days afterwards, I received an email from his legislative correspondent expressing interest in setting up some sort of meeting, and that's what finally happened on the 22nd of October, which for me saying this was just about a few hours ago, but I don't know how long it was for you watching this. Now, the meeting itself was very brief, about 25 minutes or so, and it was over the phone with just Senator Cardin's chief counsel who worked with him on such matters and myself, as a third party was unable to attend. And before I go any further, I do have to note that it was nothing but professional, and I feel I was respectfully listened to and heard and engaged with, just as I was via email. So I would like to thank those in Senator Cardin's office, whose names I will not mention because I didn't ask if I could do so, but I am appreciative for how I was treated throughout this whole process. It really was a very positive experience overall. Now, during the call, I reiterated my ideas in brief, and we had some frank discussions about the importance of approaching this issue seriously, quickly, and with rationality. Now, when they emailed me, they'd sent a message from Senator Cardin that outlined the genesis of a bill he's co-sponsoring on police reform. And while I agreed with much of it, I did point out that using three names in tandem, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, should be amended to better reflect the situation, as the only commonality all three had was being black and being in recent news. Now, one case had absolutely nothing to do with the police whatsoever, and the other two that did were under very different situations. And the senator's description of the circumstances of the death of Miss Taylor, which was tragic in any event, were at odds with the actual facts of the case. She was not sleeping soundly and peacefully in her bed. Now, I spoke about that case at some length in episode 1.2 for those who want more on that, so I won't belabor it here. But the point I was trying to make was in keeping things consistent. I suggested the use of Philando Castile and Walter Scott as alternatives, while noting that it's very sad that I even have so many alternatives to choose from, and it's emblematic of exactly why reformation is necessary and important. When someone like me, or someone that follows things as closely as I do, sees a preamble, if you will, that's meant to justify what follows, and it has false or misleading, however unintentional statements, it casts a bit of doubt that due diligence was done to the fullest throughout. So I stress the importance of not conflating situations and being more accountable and responsible in the terminology used, as well as being willing to report and explain facts with as much vigor as hearsay. And that's not only for politicians, but for the media as well, perhaps even more so these days. We talked about the importance of context when discussing numbers and of individual cases, instead of trying to apply a one-size-fits-all mentality in which we automatically assume every instance of a shooting or whatever is inherently based on race or a wrongdoing. In Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and in D.C., about a week apart, we saw two cases that were captured on body cams that were clear as day justified shootings. But until those videos were released, there were protests and even some violent rioting, particularly in Lancaster. I mentioned that it felt like most civilians' ideas of what happens on the job is based on misconceptions on TV and movies, as well as a media that only focuses, on the worst of all sides to sell papers or raise ratings, and that sort of stuff needs to end. Ideas like Senator Biden's, shoot them in the leg notion is, irresponsible at best, laughably inane at worst, for reasons that I thoroughly spoke about back in episode 1.1. And while ideas like requiring a college degree I can see the logic of on the face of it, one of the big problems is the way that it limits the potential applicant pool because of the financial burden it places by forcing someone who may not want to go to college or be able to afford it to pony up the money to enter the profession, assuming they pass the qualifications in the first place. Something that's statistically more liable to disproportionately adversely affect minority applicants at a time when we're trying to increase their presence on the streets, given that minorities are unfortunately less likely to have the same access to affordable education opportunities as education costs continue to rise. And as I've said in other episodes, better education and training, not necessarily more, is really where the focus should be on that front. I restated that police accountability is important in making sure that facts of any deaths involving the police are transparently released. No more can we or should we just accept an internal investigation deemed a shoot good or bad with nothing other than an I promise. Show the receipts. No more hiding or moving bad officers like we've seen, or like Hollywood and the church have done in the past with directors or actors or actresses or priests over the years instead of punishing them. Make it safe for cops to come forward and erase that stigma of snitching. Because here's the thing. If you're a cop and you care more about the fact that someone ratted out a cop who was dirty or abusive and abusing the badge, than about the fact that there's a cop who is dirty or abusive in your profession in the first place, well, then you're part of the problem, full stop. Overall, our discussion, while short, was productive, and the next steps are the office is going to email me copies of the legislation so that I can comment on it and offer suggestions or input for consideration, as well as a list of contacts throughout local and state government offices that are currently working on similar legislation. I was informed that at those levels things are moving pretty quickly, and now is the time to really get involved to have a say. While I definitely agree things are urgently needed, I am a little bit concerned that things will perhaps be rushed through more on emotion to appease groups and slogans, rather than with more logic and understanding of the consequences of certain policies in both the short and long term on not only policing but also the community at large. I agree with a shifting from a warrior mentality of policing to more of a guardian mentality, something that was brought up during President Obama's administration. But at the same time, we must be cautious to not swing things so polar opposite and with no care for the fallout, or else you get things like 4 blocks being essentially held hostage for months in Minnesota, a massive spike in crime in New York City due to the disbandment of entire units, unchecked crime in some areas here in Maryland where police, from what I've been told by them, are literally afraid at times to do their job because they feel like local officials, like in Baltimore, do everything they can to hamstring them and make every move subject to intense scrutiny or even unfounded accusations that have led to a very hands-off approach at times in a city that's seen almost as many murders at this point this year than at this point last year, and they've been under various COVID restrictions or curfews or whatever for the majority of it. Now, I was told that depending on the election results, things at a federal and national level may not move, as quickly, or they may move more quickly. We'll see. But things are currently more apt to hang-ups due to, well, political bickering, my term, not the chief counsel's. There are groups on both sides lobbying to be heard, but they seem to be lobbying more for themselves than for all of us. So I'm hoping with these channels I've opened that maybe this is the start for someone like me, an independent, an American at the crossroads, as it were, to make some noise and get some moderate representation that can apply new laws and regulations with more equity to all members of our communities, not just some. And I feel now, as I always have, that that's really important. A more even-handed approach, because this isn't and shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is something that greatly affects us all, and it's time we started acting like it, and it's time we stopped catering to the cheap seats occupied by the partisan extremes. I set out on a mission here to inspire cooperation, to engage discussions, but it's becoming clearer every day to me that there are too many parts of the partisan cult mentality that are pretty much impenetrable at this point. People tell me voices like mine are important. Oh man, we need some moderates like that. I'm tired of hearing all that. But then they tune them out. They scroll past. They don't tune in. So moderates, I can't do it by myself. It's time for us to stand and stop being silent. Look at the extremes hijacking the parties and ask yourselves, am I okay with this? Am I good with allowing this because right now I'm not a target? Because I'm not. Because people who want to hold 12-step programs for being white on college campuses, people who want to kidnap politicians for COVID restrictions, people who wish death upon politicians when they're sick as some sort of divine karma, people who refuse to acknowledge social and racial and gender disparities and injustices, people in the Chris Pratt, etc. pitchfork attacks on Twitter, people jumping over any scrap on Hunter Biden without actual substantiation. I've said it before. These are the people hijacking the parties and being courted and getting all the press and the attention, and I'm past done with it. These videos have never been one of those something is X, change my mind. They're here hopefully to encourage people to maybe open up their minds a bit more, maybe see things a bit differently, even in disagreement. That's okay. I know there aren't many viewers, but you know what? Hey, all it takes is one or two, and maybe it sparks something. Maybe it encourages someone to take action. Look at what I did in the past few weeks. I started these videos, I reached out to local law enforcement and the government, and already that's yielded more results than a profile pic change and an echo chamber slogan. Those things are fine, whatever, but by themselves, they don't really accomplish anything. If you want to get something done, if you want to be an activist, well, then you need to be active. It is in the name. That's why it's called that. So maybe I get smacked down and this is all just pointless tilting at windmills. Maybe I never get more than a few dozen views. Maybe I just keep getting ignored and unfollowed and unfriended and scrolled past. But maybe I reach that one person who could take the baton and run with it. Maybe someone gets inspired enough to talk to their representatives and try and get involved in the legislative process and have some input. Maybe this opens the door for moderates to finally get a bit more of the spotlight. I have no idea. I didn't start this for money or to be famous. I don't make a dime off a click or a share or subscription. There's no corporate sponsor here. It's just me. I do this in my basement because I believe that it can serve a purpose. I believe that these are important things to discuss and have discussions on. And maybe I fail spectacularly and I remain completely in the shadows in this tiny little YouTube page. But you know what? I'll fail trying, knowing that, hey, at least I did that much. I'd rather that than never trying at all and wondering what might have been if I had. So stay safe, be well, share this country, share this world. Thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you next time. This has been Charles J. Basrap on #TheThing.